All right, so here we are. We're going to talk a little bit about Chapter 9. I'm not going to spend any time on Chapter 7 as we've discussed previously. It's regarding research. We're not going to do that because I think you probably have an idea about how to do research, or at least I hope you do at this point. And you can read the chapter. And so I'm going to leave it to you to read the chapter. One thing I would note about, and I may have said this before, if I did, forgive me, but one thing about doing research, if you're going to do internet research, if you're doing internet research, please, Wikipedia is, as I have said to people before, don't remember if I've said to this class, but Wikipedia is a good place to start, but it's not typically a very good resource to cite as a serious source. Now, you can cite Wikipedia and say, well, Wikipedia mentioned this, but you need to add things to undergird it. All right, so that's my entire speech on research. Don't trust Wikipedia, basically, and if you use it, make sure you have plenty of other good sources and that it's clear that Wikipedia was either a starting point or a means of making an example of something. All right, so let's go into Chapter 9. I will email the quiz on Chapter 8, by the way. All right, now let me say this, by the way. Throughout this video, I'm going to occasionally say something. I'm going to say a word, and you have got to know what that word is, and you're going to have to know what that word is because it's going to be on the quiz. And there will be 4 of these words, 4, count them, right? And I will intersperse them throughout the video. Thus, in order to get those answers right on the quiz, you have to actually watch the whole video. Sneaky, right? Yeah. Well, that's kind of crazy guy I am. I am a lawyer. Honestly, you know what? That's what they do to us when lawyers watch stuff on video, and you have to have a code at the end of the video in order to get what's called continuing legal education credit. You have to watch the whole thing, and you can't fast forward. And so you're kind of stuck. And the way I'm doing this, you can't fast forward because you never know when I might say one of the magic words. 4 of them. Okay. And so what I'll do is intersperse those magic words. I'll alert you that this is one of the magic words, by the way. So you'll know. But you better write it down because it's going to be on the quiz, because that'll tell me you watched the whole video. All right. All right. So let's stand up, and if you're in a position to stand up, go ahead and do it. I know it's crazy and it's weird that you're watching a video of me and we're not actually doing this in class, but stand up. We're going to stand up, okay? And there you go. I'm trying to make sure I've got myself in a good position here so you can see. And I want you to take a deep breath through your nose if at all possible, okay? So, and then just let it out. And then do it again. Okay, just let it out. All right, now, here's what I want you to see. I want you to bend over some. And now I want you to breathe in through your nose. And you can feel that it's just not quite the same. It's not quite the same. And you just don't get quite the same volume of air when you do that. Your diaphragm doesn't work quite as efficiently. Thus, standing up straight as best you can is always a good idea when you're going to deliver a speech. Okay, and so you want to do that because as your diaphragm works better when it's going up and down, and then not trying to go up and down and sort of sideways at the same time. Second thing about standing up straight is that the more air you get in, the more air you can expel. Now, those of you, if any of you are singers, you understand this concept of breathing while you're speaking, right? And when you're singing, and I don't know a lot about singing, but I know enough to know this, that you have to constantly be taking air in to sing because you're pushing so much air out. And the same is going to be true with your public speaking. You're going to want to make sure you're always bringing air in, because that's how you get the air out to make the noises that you're making. If you look in the book, you'll see that the book goes into some detail about the biology, and let's talk about that for just a minute, and I will do that for just a minute, and we'll talk about the biology here. The biology is interesting because you bring in the air, and I probably have already talked about this, but nonetheless, I'm going to mention it again. My thought that repetition is good pedagogy. When you take that air in, And then you start breathing it out. An amazing thing happens. Air comes out of your lungs. It goes up through your windpipe here, right? It rolls across your larynx. Your larynx vibrates, right? Which helps to make the noises that you make. It goes up. You got that little dangly thing back in the back of your throat. I think that's called the epiglottis. I think. I don't remember now. Right? And that's, has some effect on the air that's coming through. You've also got your tongue and your teeth and your lips. Often when little children lose front teeth, they will talk with a bit of a lisp. Well, there's a reason for that, because the two front teeth aren't there in their tongue when it jumps up in a spot that it's not supposed to be in. And so it changes the dynamic of the way the words are being formed. It's very important. Now, I'm going to take an apologetic side moment here. So word number one is apologetic, by the way. So keep that in mind. Word number one is the word apologetic. A-P-O-L-O-G-E-T-I-C. Okay, you'll need to know that I said that. You don't need to know the definition, you just need to know the word. Now, apologetic just means a defense of the faith. And the apologetic moment I want to take here, just for a minute, is this. When you start thinking about it, language is an amazing differentiation between us and other creatures. We can speak and articulate words through speaking or writing, and even through other means, obviously, in ways that other creatures cannot. Now, other creatures have forms of communication, but it's not the same thing. It just isn't, okay? And I want you to think about this idea for a minute. If language, particularly human language, came about as a result of simply activity in the universe and evolution as it occurred, then here's what you have to believe. You have to believe that a non-thinking, non-being, non-directing, non-logical, non-rational activity known as evolution somehow resulted in our ability to effectively communicate. Now, forgetting even the actual elements of brain power that go into it, let's just talk about just the physical reality. Other animals make noises. They don't make specific noises the way we do that can articulate past, present, future, complicated ideas. They just can't. Even the very smartest of animals, elephants, whales, dolphins, chimpanzees, can communicate only on a very, very modest level. Okay, they simply don't, again, so far as we can tell in any event, but I mean, look around, you don't see chimpanzees having a seminar about human beings, and deciding whether they're good enough to be called chimps. So that doesn't happen. They're not building anything. They're not thinking into the future, at least certainly not beyond a few moments ahead of time, maybe a day, perhaps, but certainly not into next week or 2 years from now. They don't plan like that. They can't. They're not capable. And they can't articulate. One of the reasons they can't do that is because they have no language ability to do it. And so we aren't the same. We're qualitatively different. Well, if all that is a result, it just seems bizarre to think that what we do, particularly in public speaking, is just a matter of just the universe just sort of happening. Although maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, a couple other things. Use words you know. And if you don't use words you know, make sure that if you're going to use a word you don't currently know, that you go to the dictionary, look it up, Make sure you've got the way to say it down. Make sure you understand what the word means. Make sure you're putting it in the proper context. You want to do all those things whenever you find a word that you aren't familiar with. I would shy away, for the most part, from using multisyllabic words such as multisyllabic. So, in other words, 1 and 2 syllable words are best most of the time for most public speaking engagements. 1 and 2 syllables. Even the word syllable has 3 syllables. I mean, but I can't get around it. It's the word, right? It's okay to use 3-syllable words when you need to. Make sure you understand them. Make sure that you don't think it's pushing your audience too far. Okay, so you got to know, again, it goes back to, remember, we talked about knowing your audience. And that's important that you know your audience. Now, maybe sometimes you are, for instance, you're in a role of a teacher and you're pushing your audience. Well, that may be a little different than when you're doing a speech in front of a group of people that contains a smattering of different kinds of people and you don't know for sure what their level of ability to think is. And so consequently, and here's one of those big words, right? Now that's a really good one. Consequently, that's 4 syllables, but you know what it means, right? Consequently, if you got to be careful. So just make sure you're using them correctly. All right. Things to do on the in the book, and let me get my book out here real quick. And it's page 185. You know, I can't remember if I've gotten the latest upgrade. I think I do, but if it's not, it's not on page 185. I'll tell you what it is. I'm going to show you what I'm looking at. There's a chart called breathing exercises. See that? Breathing exercises. And you might want to think about doing some of those. And these are ways to loosen yourself up as you get ready to do a public speaking encounter. And it helps you to learn to increase and decrease volume particularly. All right. And so you want to think about that. Vowel sounds, the book talks about vowel and consonant sounds. I'm not going to go into a lot of these specific details. You can read that stuff. And I want you to read it because you'll need to know some of these specifics from the chapter on the quiz. So there's a lot of terms in this chapter. Make sure you know them, okay? And make sure you understand what the book is talking about with these things. Betty Botter is a little ditty that the book mentions, and again, it's one of those things you can use. It's a little what I would call tongue twister. In my book, it's on page 180. Betty Botter bought some butter, but she said the butter's bitter. It's kind of like, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood kind of thing. You say this and use it, not because it makes any sense, because it doesn't. It's just a silly little ditty, but it gets you limbered up, right? Just like an athlete who is exercising before the game, right? You want to get yourself limbered up and juiced up and ready to go, and so you would do this kind of exercise, the Betty Botter or something like that, just to kind of and singers do this kind of stuff, by the way. They'll get their voices limbered up a little bit, and so public speakers, it's worth doing, especially if you are having any problems. All right. Now, the words I'm going to use, by the way, as these little words that you need to know, and I'm alerting you now, I'm going to give you the second word. They're kind of random because I'm looking around at all kinds of different stuff. And the second word is going to be Leo, L-E-O, Leo. That's my grandson's name. So that's the second word you need to know. All right. Let's look at some language and some use of language. I want to turn to actual use of words. This is from a poet, or from a poem, obviously by a poet, someone who wrote a poem, and the author's name is not important. But I want you to just listen to how it reads, and you can see the words. Future, you confound me. You call out, you beckon, you entice. You glimmer in the distance like a cool blue pond in the midst of a green meadow under a white hot summer's sun. Yet you are never there. Now I want you to notice some things here. First, all the words here are 2 syllables or less, 1 or 2 syllables. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, notice the manner in which the words are used. Uh, the author is talking about the future and then refers to the future as you, okay? And so it's, you know, the future is not a you, right? Not really. It's neither a YOU nor is it an EWEU. Um, that's kind of a dad joke, I know, or a grandpa joke, either way, whatever. Um, the language here is not, it's simple but not simplistic, okay? And so anyone pretty much will understand these words. Confound and beckon, maybe those two might cause hiccups for some people, but in context, I think they would get the message. And so you call out, you beckon, you entice, right? Well, those are all basically the same idea, not exactly the same, but very similar, right? Calling and beckoning and enticing are all kind of the same sort of thing. And notice too, by the way, the use of the verbs, okay? Confound, call out, beckon, entice, glimmer. Okay, these are not, there's nothing passive. These are all active verbs. Useful when you're talking, useful when you're speaking, okay? So keep that in mind. Poetry, believe it or not, is a good place to find the kind of ways in which people try to use words to convey something in a way that will make it memorable and helpful for people to understand. I know that sounds like, no, it's not poetry, but it really is. Poets really are seeking that when they write things like this. So this author is talking about the future and is confounded, as it says, because the future seems to be calling out to this author and seems to look good, and yet it sounds like when he gets to the future's not there. Where is it? Where's the future? It was there. It was. And so you sort of get this sense of what's going on in the author's mind here. There's more to that's not the whole poem. There's more to it. All right, here's another brief. Oh, you know what? Let me go back. I want to go back to one other thing. Notice the parallelism here. You call out, you beckon, you entice, you glimmer, you confound, you know, all these things. It's going to always sound forced if you try to do this. And I know that's what you'll think if you try to do it, but I'm telling you, this can be extremely powerful using this kind of parallelism. Read Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Read the Beatitudes. Read them out loud. Okay, for crying out loud. There's a band from the 1960s called The Byrds. They made a song out of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It's true. It's called Turn, Turn, Turn. Go to YouTube and go to Turn, Turn, Turn. For every season, blah, blah, blah. And they go on, and they're pulling language right out of Ecclesiastes for their song, for a song by a rock band. So don't think, my point being, don't think that language isn't meaningful and useful and helpful in conveying your message, and don't think using it is somehow to whatever. If you can do it and do it well and make it work, right? If it works in context of whatever you're talking about, use this kind of language, okay? And don't be afraid to use parallelism or use alliteration if that'll work. And again, the old KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. The stupid is you, by the way, not them, okay? When you use the KISS principle, what you're doing is pointing back at yourself. Hey, stupid. You're looking in the mirror and you're going, hey, stupid. Keep it simple, right? You're not talking about your audience. You're talking about you, okay? And so that's not a bad principle here. And these words, you know, clearly they're very simple. Here's another one. I'm going to tell you who this poet is, by the way. This is the end of a poem. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper, or but a whimper. That's by T.S. Eliot. It's called The Hollow Men. Certainly it's worth reading The Hollow Men if you get a chance. I won't give you a lot of detail on T.S. Eliot, except to say that he was writing in the middle of the 1920s. You can see 1925, and was kind of looking at the excess of the Paris, what was going on in Paris in the 1920s, and realizing that the way it was going was not, it wasn't going to end the way people thought. But anyway, note again, okay, T.S. Eliot is a world-renowned poet. Is there anything shocking with any of these words? This is the way the world ends. By the way, all of them one-syllable words. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Whimper is the only two-syllable word in this little section of the poem. If T.S. Eliot, world-renowned poet, can use such simple language to convey something so profound, so can you. That's my point. Okay. Now, let me see where we are in time. All right. Word number 3. This is of the magic words that you need to know. Word number 3 is hollow. Hollow. All right. Oh, I see where I am. So I'm near the end of my slides, so we'll be done in just a minute. All right. Again, we're talking about word choices here now. We're talking about use of language, and not just the mechanics, but now the actual use of words and language. Irony. Here's what I'm going to say about irony. And if you can see it, and maybe you can there on your screen, you see the word no, okay? Irony is delightful, and I love it actually, because I see it all the time, and I find it amusing. But here's the problem. Too frequently, irony devolves into sarcasm, or it's satirical, or it's sarcastic, or it's just downright mean. And it often escapes people. And I will candidly tell you that I am deeply concerned with what I see in the way people don't seem to understand the ironic anymore. And so I don't think it's useful right now. Now, maybe someday we'll get back to where you can actually use irony as a means of communication. But right now, people simply don't seem to recognize it when they utter ironic things, thus leading me to conclude people don't understand irony and don't see the inconsistency that irony is. Okay, I mean, and if you don't know what irony is, basically, and this is not the dictionary definition, this is the Gus Nelson definition, but irony is essentially when you juxtapose two things in such a manner that it becomes apparent that the juxtaposition creates an anomaly that is often humorous, not necessarily, but often is humorous, or is just simply so anomalous that it creates tension in the listener or the person who's reading it. So don't use it, basically. Stay away from ironic statements, even as a teaching tool. I mean, every once in a while I will fall into that, and maybe I've even done it with you all, I don't know. But I will occasionally fall into the ironic as a means of teaching. But even that, because people are so, and again, part of the reason irony is a problem is because people are so touchy these days that sometimes you might say something that you intend to use for its irony, and somebody gets very upset and frustrated and angry. And if they do that, they're not going to pay attention or listen to whatever else you're saying. And so, at least at this moment in our history, at least in the United States, I would say that satire, sarcasm, irony, just kind of lay off, be a little more straightforward in the things you're saying. Unless, and there's exceptions to every rule, obviously, if you are talking to a group of people that you know well, you know your audience very well, and you know that they can handle it, and not only can they handle it, but they will understand it, then you're okay. But For a general audience, whenever you, or an audience you don't know very well, stay away. Okay. And this is just sort of funny. I thought things I hate: vandalism, irony, and lists. This person obviously has a sense of humor and also understands irony. Okay. All right, this is my last slide, so we're almost done here. We're getting ready to land the plane. This is not a rule of thumb for me. Don't use profanity in public speaking. Just don't. I actually, at one point, started a little 1-minute public speaking tips thing, and I was going to try to do that, and maybe I'll pick that back up at some point in the future. But one of the things I do in that little 1-minute series is talk about profanity. And so I'm going to tell you right now what I would say in that little 1-minute tip. And it'll probably take a little bit longer than 1 minute, but essentially this. In my experience, and I've been hearing people speak for a long, long time, and I've done a lot of speaking on myself, it is so exceedingly rare that profanity adds anything of substance or necessity to a public speaking venture that it's not useful. Rarely, in my experience, does someone's use of profanity convey anything of value. More often than not, it's used when other language is not, when the person's basically being lazy. That's been my experience. Instead of actually thinking about what they want to say, they throw it out there, or they throw it out for emphasis. Well, if you're going to emphasize something, emphasize it. There are other means of emphasizing things. You can talk slower. You can talk softer and emphasize, or you can talk louder, right? You don't have to use profanity to emphasize, so it's not necessary there. It's just hard to think of any time when it's meaningful, useful, and therefore I take the position that it's just don't do it. Just don't. Okay. And so this is one time when I would disagree with Orwell. This is an exception to my love of Orwell's rules of writing. Don't use profanity. Just stay away, because it will make your speaking, and your writing, by the way, it will make it more meaningful. It will make it more elegant. It will require you to actually think instead of just plugging in cliched words, which most profanity is cliche, by the way. And so just don't. All right, well, that ends this session. The last word you need to know is the word giant. Okay, giant, G-I-A-N-T, giant. All right, so there you go. All right, I will be sending some stuff out. I will send you some emails, and we'll continue forward.